Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. Apologies if the lighting and the setup in here is a bit off. As you guys know, I just set up my library slash studio in this room, and so I'm still trying to figure out the angles and the lighting and just all of that jazz. But also my skin is not skinning today, so that's why I'm sitting a little bit further back because oh no, Bookie, it's not giving. I'm having a time right now with my skin. I'm really looking into Accutane as well as Curology. I do need to meet with an actual dermatologist, but I actually just started this job not too long ago, so my benefits haven't kicked in yet. But once they do, I'm definitely going to look into an actual dermatologist or an esthetician. But in the meantime, I think I am going to look into the Accutane Curology route. I don't know if Accutane requires insurance. It might, so if it does, then I will be going with Curology for the time being. But yeah, y'all, your girl is struggling and she's trying to get back on track in every way possible. Gym, skin, nails, hair, like just everything. Like I'm trying to rebrand, especially before 2024 hits, because I'm one of those people that constantly says, oh yeah, New Year's resolution. And then like I don't follow through. So I'm trying to actually just like say a resolution and just get into what I need to get into now, and then hopefully set good habits ahead of time. But I don't know, y'all, we'll see. Either way, that is why I'm sitting so far back. And like I mentioned in my August wrap up, I will give you guys a tour of what this room looks like when I get it more together. I'm constantly changing my bookshelves as well as just the actual like layout of this room. I have to put up some artwork because as you can see, I got some like paint issues going on back here. So I gotta like figure that out. So it's gonna be a little bit before I show you guys what this room looks like in full. I am planning on making some shorts as well as just like showing you guys, you know, clips here and there of what this room looks like currently. As y'all can see, the reading vlogs are officially back and I'm so excited to get back into the swing of things and just putting out more reading vlogs for you guys, because I have so many ideas for just so many different reading vlogs that I want to do and that I should have done earlier in the year. I'm just so excited to get this content out to you guys, as well as reading these books, because a lot of these books that I'm going to be featuring in my upcoming reading vlogs are going to be new releases or just anticipated releases. And so I just think it's gonna be a fun time. But today is Tuesday, September 5th, 12:12 in the afternoon. I'm actually taking a little lunch break right now. I do need to run to an orthodontist appointment because y'all, my Invisalign treatment is slowly coming to an end. I'm so relieved and excited. Even though there's still some tweaks that I want to make, I really love how my teeth look and I just cannot believe that I have come this far with my Invisalign journey and transformation. Anyways, back to the books. We are here because I'm going to be reading 3 new thriller releases for this video. So the 3 books that I'm going to include in this video are None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, The Last One Left by Riley Sager, and The Spare Room by Andrea Bartz. So the first book that I'm going to start out with is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, because if you've been a consistent viewer, then you know how much I love Lisa Jewell and her books. She's actually my favorite thriller author to date. Like, I have not really read from anyone else that has knocked the queen off of her throne for me, okay? Like, I have been a Lisa Jewell stan since, oh my goodness, when did Then She Was Gone come out? Whatever year Then She Was Gone was published is the year that I became a Lisa Jewell stan. And I'm just so happy for her, and I love to see her getting her flowers in her 10s as a thriller author. Her stories are just so addictive to me and they're so well thought out and well executed in my opinion. So I'm not only excited to kick off my reading vlogs again, but I'm excited that I get to kick them off with her book. I just feel like it's a full circle moment for me because Then She Was Gone was the book that got me into thrillers. So I'm really excited for this and I have high hopes for this book. I actually don't even know what this book is about. I was trying my hardest to not look into any synopses or reviews or anything like that because I wanted to go into this as unaware as possible, so that way I'm like actually shocked and gagged. But I'm actually going to read this book through audiobook because I'm really trying to get back into incorporating audiobooks into my reading plans, because I feel like they are really just the most convenient for me, especially working a 9 to 5, and sometimes I have to go into the office or I just have to obviously do things for work or I'm driving or whatever the case is. I just think it's easier for me to get my reading done and get my reading in when I'm listening to an audiobook. Right here the synopsis says, celebrating her 45th birthday at her local pub, popular podcaster Alex Summer crosses paths with an unassuming woman called Josie Fair. Josie, it turns out, is also celebrating her 45th birthday. They are, in fact, birthday twins. A few days later, Alex and Josie bump into each other again, this time outside Alex's children's school. Josie has been listening to Alex's podcast and thinks she might be an interesting subject for her series. She is, she tells Alex, on the cusp of great changes in her life. Josie's life appears to be strange and complicated, and although Alex finds her unsettling, she can't quite resist the temptation to keep making the podcast. Slowly, she starts to realize that Josie has been hiding some very dark secrets. And before she knows it, Josie has infiltrated her way into Alex's life and into her home. But as quickly as she arrived, Josie disappears. Only then does Alex discover that Josie has left a terrible and terrifying legacy in her wake, and that Alex has become the subject of her own true crime podcast, with her life and her family's lives under mortal threat. Who is Josie Fair? And what has she done? Lisa Jewell does it again. Her synopses always intrigue me. She does disappearance and missing persons thrillers so well. You get genuinely invested and you want to know what happened to these people, how did they disappear, and how did all of these events lead up to their disappearance. I see so many people on Bookstagram praise it and give it high reviews. Like with my other reading vlogs, I'm going to structure this very similarly in the sense that I'm going to check in with you guys when I get to the 100 page mark, give you my first initial thoughts and impressions, and then I'll check back in when I get towards the end of the story. Now, because I'm reading 3 books in this video, I might switch that up a little bit. Before I head out to my appointment, I am going to, of course, do some more work and start this audiobook.
This is Audible.
Overseas and just drape me in Gucci, no. All I ever asked was you to pick up the phone when you alone. All I ever asked was you to show me some love, kisses and hugs. No, I never had an issue, go to the club with your boys, baby. I never wanted you to stay too long, just wanted you to show me up. So won't you say my name, say my name. If you claim you want me, it ain't no that.
So it's actually the next day. It is Wednesday, September 6th at 5 o'clock. So I just got off of work and I officially made it to chapter 21. So I wanted to give you my initial thoughts on None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. First things first, I completely forgot that there are no page numbers, obviously, with audiobooks. So that's why I decided to just check it now at chapter 20 because there are only 43 chapters in this audiobook. So I felt like that was a good split. The next time I'll check in is when I officially finish the book and I'll give you my final thoughts. So the first thing that I wanted to get into and say is that this audiobook feels like an entire production. Okay, like you can tell that Lisa Jewell and her publisher, they got money, honey. What Lotto and Meg say? What's the budget? Lisa don't do budget. So I thought that was something to note because I just see that audiobooks are starting to really become more fleshed out and really have all of the bells and whistles that you would hear if you were listening to a podcast. Obviously, not every single author gets this opportunity, and Lisa Jewell has been in the game for so long, so not surprised. I find it so fascinating that now audiobooks are starting to kind of take on a life of its own. Expanding on that point a little bit more, this genuinely reads and feels as though that this is a living, breathing podcast, which makes sense because one of the main characters, Alex, her entire career is essentially being a podcaster. So that's why I said it makes sense for that to be a huge element of the story. But the way in which this audiobook is told and like laid out, it really does feel like you're listening to a podcast because they have like the intro music, the little jingles, even the way that the voice actor or narrator's voice sounds. Really appreciate the production and the attention to detail when it comes to this audiobook. It really does make the reading experience more enjoyable, more engaging. And we'll get into that a little bit more as I make my way down my list of thoughts here in my notes, but I definitely think that listening to this book via audio is the way to go. Like I mentioned, there is a character who is a podcaster and her name is Alex, and then you also have another character named Josie. Now, in terms of both Josie and Alex and who I like better and all this stuff, I don't really have a preference of one versus the other. I feel like I'm still learning both of these characters and really trying to understand which direction the story is going to take. But if I had to really like narrow down who I find a little bit more interesting or who I'm latching onto a little bit more, I guess I would say Josie, and that's mostly because Josie is a little bit of a oddball, and I hope I don't regret saying that as I get closer towards the end. I feel like Josie is a little bit strange, even though she is the one participating in Alex's podcast and Alex is finding out about Josie's life story at the same time that the reader is. I still feel like what we've gotten to know about Josie so far, yeah, her upbringing and her entire backstory is a bit jarring and is a little bit off, but I do feel bad for her because she is essentially a victim at the same time. And I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to try my hardest to not spoil too much. But when it comes to my reading vlogs, I really do like to have an open discussion, let my thoughts kind of fly. You guys will see throughout the video like maybe timestamps or just little like warnings of me possibly going into a spoiler, but as of right now, I'm gonna try my hardest to refrain. But yeah, I would say that Josie is definitely a victim and I do feel for her. But at the same time, I do think that there is something else to Josie that we just don't know yet. And I am getting a little bit of like, I don't want to say sinister vibes. I am getting a little bit of an edge to Josie and I just don't know what that is yet. And I feel like Alex peeps that too. So I'm excited to see what Alex finds out because in turn, that'll help us. I will say though that I do find Josie and Alex's friendship or partnership being based off of the fact that they're birthday twins very interesting because I didn't think that was going to be a huge part of the story. I know that it is included in the synopsis, but I just didn't think that that was going to be the foundation for their friendship slash partnership. And I do think it's interesting, especially because I'm one of those people that loves meeting other Cancers or people that have the same birthday as me. I was born on July 14th. I just feel like that's such a random day. I don't know why, but I just feel like that's a random day. So whenever I do find a birthday twin, I do get a little bit hype. I move a little. And again, especially if they're a Cancer, I definitely move up out of my seat because Cancers, I feel like, get a bad rep. Not as bad as other signs like Geminis and Sagittarius and things like that, but I feel like we do get a bad rep. Maybe more so Cancer men, because Cancer men are just oof. They are oof. I never dated one or anything like that, and Mark, my boyfriend, is not a Cancer, but I do know Cancer men and they're something, I will say that. And I feel like because of them, they kind of give Cancers overall, no matter the gender, a bad rep. But I love being a Cancer and I definitely take pride in being one. Yes, I'm emotional. Yes, I'm sensitive. Yes, I have my mood swings, okay? But I do feel like Cancers are very intuitive. We are very empathetic and we are really in tune with our emotions. And we're very creative people. And I just love that. I love that. And I feel like that describes me so well. So I definitely resonated with Josie when she was really excited to meet Alex and introduce herself and say like, hey, we have the same birthday. Cause like, I get it, girl, I do. Now, would I really go out of my way like that to let somebody know? It depends. It really does. I feel like the way that Josie did it wasn't super strange, but you know, I know not everybody is into astrology and birthdays and things like that. So it really does boil down to who you are as a person. If you find Josie's introduction to Alex a bit weird, but to me personally, I think that's a good conversation starter. One last thing that I wanted to say before I jump into my thoughts on just the pacing of the story and the meat of it, I did just want to say that the first part of this thriller, and I feel like a lot of thrillers do this, especially domestic thrillers, really harp on how terrible marriage is. It makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit icky because it's just like, why are there so many books, especially thrillers and especially domestic thrillers, that harp on how terrible and awful marriage, specifically heterosexual marriages, are? And this is something that I would love to see someone talk about, not me, because I don't feel like doing a whole deep dive into this, but I would love to see someone else, maybe in the book community or just like a commentary channel in general, talk about why marriage is portrayed so mundane and monotonous and just downright terrible for the woman in thrillers. Maybe I'm looking too deep into it. Maybe because of the fact that this is a domestic thriller, there are going to be certain themes where marriage is not portrayed in the best light in these books because they are domestic thrillers, and obviously there is going to be a murder mystery plot involved. So I get that. But I just feel like a lot of the domestic thrillers that I have read recently and just in general portray marriage as a prison. And I want to know why that is. Like, there's something there with that, especially because a lot of the thrillers that I read are written from the perspective of a woman. So I want to know, like, ladies, come to the podium, come to the front. Why is that the case? Why are there so many domestic thrillers where marriage is portrayed just completely awful and just not beneficial to the woman? Like I said, there's something there. I know that there are, of course, a lot of books and just articles written about how marriage is more of a benefit to men than it is women. If you look at it from the financial standpoint and just labor standpoint, like emotional labor, household labor, domestic labor, things like that. So I wonder if that really does seep into thrillers and just how female authors write their books or go about their books. That was just something that I wanted to kind of put out there as a thought starter, as a food for thought type of thing, because I would love to have a discussion about that. Again, maybe I'm looking too deep into it. I do tend to get into my feminist bag a little bit too much when I read certain fictional stories, but it's just something that I had to bring up. Like, I wouldn't be me if I didn't bring it up. So yeah. Anyways, getting into the actual meat and just the overall plot of the story, not too much has happened yet, y'all. I'm literally on chapter 21 and I just feel like nothing has happened. Things are happening, but things are also not happening at the same time. Like, there hasn't really been any moments or chapters where I'm like, whoa, that was wild, or whoa, didn't see that coming. I haven't gotten there yet, so I don't know when we're actually going to get to that point in the story, because I feel like the Lisa Jewell books that I have read so far, a lot of them start off with a bang, or you're met with that bang pretty early on in the story. And I just feel like right now I've gotten a lot of background info on Josie and Alex, and we're getting a slow start into unraveling Josie's story, but I just feel like there still hasn't really been anything huge happening yet. And that doesn't mean that I'm not enjoying the story or that I'm going to DNF it. I have said in other videos of mine, because Lisa Jewell is my favorite thriller author, I understand that she is a bit more of a slow burn thriller author, but I just feel like this book is a little bit different in comparison to the other books that I have read, because while those were slow burn, Then She Was Gone, I Found You, Watching You, The Night She Disappeared, and while they were all slow burn, I still felt like there was a bit of action early on. And with this book, I feel like we haven't really gotten there yet, at least to me. There are some things that have happened where I was like, ooh, okay, I'll make a mental note of that, or ooh, okay, let me make sure I put a pin in that because that might come back up in the story later. In terms of anything wild happening regarding the plot or the characters, nothing has really happened yet. And so I'm just curious to see how long it's going to take for something to actually pop off, and if it's worth it in the end. I don't know. Right now, I will say, y'all, this is not my favorite Lisa Jewell novel that I've read, but it could take a turn because I still got 23 chapters left, and she always throws a curveball in her stories that make me take a step back and say, damn, okay, now I'm reminded why you're my favorite thriller author. So yeah, I'm gonna trust the process, I'm gonna trust the queen and see what she delivers as I get closer to the end of the story. But as of right now, nothing is really happening. And because of that, I am really glad that I listened to this via audio, because if I would have read this physically, I don't want to say I would have DNF'd it because I really don't like to DNF Lisa Jewell books, but it would have took me a little minute to, I feel like, get to chapter 21. And I definitely recommend going that route if you are not the biggest slow burn thriller fan, because yeah, there's a lot of background knowledge that you're gonna have to obtain before you get to the actual meat of the story. So just keep that in mind. So I will check back in with y'all when I get to the end. As you know, I have 3 books that I need to read for this video, so I can't spend too much time on each book individually, but I will give you guys my final thoughts when I get to chapter 43. Hi, yes. Can I have a small iced hazelnut coffee with 3 cream and 2 sugar?
Small iced coffee, hazelnut?
Yep, 3 cream, 2 sugar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Hi. Hi, here you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Alright, have a good day.
Thank you, you too. Food secured, y'all. Let me hurry up because this girl behind me is like, you could tell she want her food, okay? And I'm not even trying to say that in like a mean way, but like, she kept speeding up any single time the line moved. She was like boom boom, like moving up, bow bow. No, but seriously, like doing a lot, doing the most. It's been a few days since I last checked in, but I officially finished None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, and I'm going to get into my final thoughts now. I have a lot, so definitely make sure you grab a snack, grab a drink, whatever the case is, because we have a lot to discuss about this book. So this light, please ignore it. It is terrible. As you can see, it's busted, it's broken, it's leaning like the Tower of Pisa, child. Like, it's so bad. I've had this lamp since I was a teenager and I need to get a new one. So that's also on my list. My priority list is getting a new lamp and just making sure that the lighting in here does not look like a harsh yellow, because
this looks disgusting.
Okay, so right off the bat, initial thoughts that I can give before I dive into my individual ones. This wasn't my favorite Lisa Jewell novel, but I appreciated what she did with this one. I do. Her mind, as well as other thriller authors' minds, continue to amaze me, because for you to be able to come up with new twists and turns and new plots that are going to grip your readers and really making sure that it serves its purpose at surprising them or shocking them or even scaring them to a certain extent is no easy feat. And I just feel like Lisa Jewell has been doing this for a long time. Like, you can tell she's definitely a vet in the game, but her talent is truly unmatched, and I'm happy to say that she still has that title of being my favorite thriller author of all time. Like, it is what it is. Like, the girl's just not doing it like Miss Jewell. They not. And you can tell, I'm not going to get into who I think is one of her sons, but you could tell that Lisa Jewell got some sons. She do. She the blueprint. I don't care what anyone says, especially when it comes to domestic thrillers, but specifically slow burn domestic thrillers. No one does it like Lisa Jewell. I love that she's able to put her own spin, of course, on these stories, and you just know, like, oh, this is a Lisa Jewell novel. So yeah, I just had to give my girl her 10s. I had to give her praise, because even though, like I said, this wasn't my favorite novel of hers, I still appreciated what she did, and it still fucked with me, low-key, like mentally, like like psychologically. And whenever I'm reading a psychological thriller, that's what I want. So one of the things that I really wanted to say that I have here is that one thing about Lisa Jewell, she won't have a mother who is missing her daughter. There's always going to be a missing person, and it's usually a daughter. It's usually a young girl, and it's usually someone's daughter, and like the mom is involved in the story. That's one thing that I just noticed when reading this book, is that it seems like she always finds a way to include true crime elements to a certain extent, and I like that. I like that that's her style, especially because as someone who watches true crime, I see it. I see the vision. So now moving into the actual characters, I'm not going to talk about every single one that we were introduced to, but I am going to talk about the main people that stuck out to me, because there was a lot going on. There was a lot of moving parts. So starting with Alex, I thought that Alex was an interesting character for sure, and I really loved the fact that her podcast played a huge part in this story. I did not expect her podcast to be as wrapped up into the plot as it was. I obviously knew it was going to be a big element of the story, but for it to really be the catalyst for so many different things that popped off within the story, I just thought that was really cool how that was included, especially in today's age, because podcasts, of course, are like the thing. Everyone is a podcaster, it seems like, especially a true crime podcaster. It definitely made the audiobook experience, like I said before, even more fun and enjoyable to listen to. I'm very curious to see what the physical book looks like now, like the pages and just how they break out the podcast chapters and the flashback chapters and things like that. But at least with the audiobook, I loved it. And then the last thing that I guess I'll say about Alex is that I do feel really bad for her, because to be used as a pawn in the way in which she was used was just so sickening and disturbing and truly wicked. And I've never read a story, but especially a thriller, where it really messes with your perception, and it really makes you want to take a step back and not even interact with strangers or welcome new people into your life or your space, because you just don't know what their true intentions are or what their motivations are. And I just think that this story was a great reminder of that, of just being cautious about who you let into your life, who you let into your space, especially when it comes to your career or money, chasing a bag. Like, not all money is good money. I just feel like Alex's role in this story really showed that, and I just felt really bad for her. I felt bad for her family. I just couldn't even imagine how you move on and move forward after everything that she went through. I don't know. If Alex was a real person, I feel like they would probably be in therapy for years, okay? Because the trauma that they endured and that they would endure throughout the rest of their life, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And I'm so serious. I am so serious, y'all. I wouldn't wish what Alex went through on my worst enemy. So yeah, you do find yourself getting connected to these characters and their storylines, and you're with them obviously from the beginning into the end, and you see just how drastically their life changed, and it just really takes you on an emotional roller coaster. The one thing that I will say that I didn't really care for about Alex was there were a lot of moments throughout the story where I felt like she was victim shaming Josie, and I just didn't understand that part and why that was included in the story. I understand that, you know, as human beings, we're not perfect. When someone is a bit sus or someone is giving us vibes that they are not the most truthful person, I understand, you know, wanting to react in a certain way, but I still don't think that excuses victim shaming, in my opinion, especially with Josie, because regardless of whatever Josie had going on and whatever she was doing, she was still pursued by a man who was, what, double, 3 times her age? I don't even know, but Walter pursued a teenager girl. Like, let's be serious, you know? So I just didn't like that part of the story, and I trying to figure out why that was included, but also at the same time, it is a story at the end of the day, so like maybe I should have looked too deep into it. But that was something about Alex's character that I thought was a bit off-putting, because it's like, girl, I understand that Josie is giving you weird vibes, like, for sure, like something's off. Don't dismiss the fact that she was pursued by a predator, essentially. And I think she said something along the lines of like, Josie allowed herself to be groomed, and I just, Oh, that was icky. That was really icky. I did roll my eyes at that. And there were a few moments I feel like throughout the story where people were victim shaming Josie and just other young girls I think that popped up throughout the story who also had similar experiences to Josie. I don't want to give too much away, of course. I just didn't like the victim shaming. I wish we could stop with that. That's really all I have to say about Alex. I love the way that Lisa Jewell played with perception and the truth in this story. I usually don't like when my thrillers end on an ambiguous or like a vague, confusing, questionable type of note, but I actually didn't mind it for the story. I felt like it fit with the actual topic at hand, the title, and it made sense. I'm still sitting here days later trying to work out what I read and work out who was actually telling the truth. There's a specific character who touches on this a little bit, and even they say, you know, I can't even unravel myself from this web of lies. But I definitely feel like this is one of her more clever stories. I just feel like this one was different, especially because it felt like this was kind of a fever dream at certain points because of the way that the story would kind of trail off because you didn't know who to believe. Those are all of my thoughts on None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I thought this was very clever, very dark, very sick, and sad. Honestly, like I said, so many people's lives were destroyed and it honestly felt like a Shakespearean tragedy. Now that I'm thinking about it, it truly felt like I read a Shakespearean tragedy. So yeah, shout out to Lisa Jewell, the GOAT, the queen when it comes to thrillers, especially slow burn thrillers. I will say that this book is very, very slow burn. So if you are not into slow burn thrillers, then you might want to reconsider reading this one. Definitely make sure you check out the audiobook. It is a full-on production. There are 2 narrators actually. I found that out. There are 2 narrators and they do an incredible job. Like they were narrating down. In terms of my rating, I'm gonna have to give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I genuinely did enjoy this. Again, it wasn't my favorite Lisa Jewell book, but she did what she needed to do and I really appreciate her for coming up with this plot and experimenting the way that she did. So the next book that I'm going to read for this video is The Spare Room by Andrea Bartz. Before we jump into that, I did just want to read the synopsis so that way you guys are caught up to speed. Oh, this is sitting at a 3.13 star on Goodreads. Oh, y'all. Yikes. Okay, so right here, the synopsis says, staying with a friend and her husband is sexier and deadlier than anyone could have imagined. In this provocative domestic suspense novel from the New York Times bestselling author of You Were Never Here, Kelly's new life in Philly has turned into a nightmare. She's friendless and jobless, and the lockdown has her trapped in a tiny apartment with the man she gave up everything for, who's just called off their wedding. The only bright spot is her newly rekindled friendship with her childhood friend Sabrina, now a glamorous best-selling author with a handsome, high-powered husband. When Sabrina and Nathan offer Kelly an escape hatch, volunteering the spare room of their remote Virginia mansion, she jumps at the chance to run away from her old life. There, Kelly secretly finds herself falling for both her enchanting host until one night, a wild and unexpected threesome leads the couple to open their marriage for her. At first, Kelly loves being part of this risque new world, but when she discovers that the last woman they invited into the marriage is missing, she starts to wonder if they could be dangerous, and if she might be next. Oh, this sounds good. This sounds like this is going to be... Y'all, I'm so sorry. The lighting in here is getting a bit out of control. As you can tell by my last video, I'm trying to get it under control. But anyways, that synopsis sounds really good. And even though a lot of people did not like We Were Never Here by Andrea Bartz, I was one of the few that loved it. That is one of my favorite thrillers of all time. I love the way that Andrea Bartz explored toxic female friendships in that book. Kristen and Emily, that is a friendship that I would never want to be a part of. And I know a lot of people did not like We Were Never Here. And I see that a lot of people did not really care for The Spare Room. And I feel like with that book, it was very campy, very theatrical, and over the top. And I'm not sure, of course, how The Spare Room will turn out, but if it's anything like We Were Never Here, then yeah, I could definitely see why people didn't like it. I feel like people are just very harsh critics when it comes to romance and thriller books, but especially thrillers. Like, people are very, very tough on thrillers. If you do not make thrillers gritty and dark and serious and have commentary, I feel like people will pay it dust. But I love those type of thrillers, of course, but I also love fun. We'll check back in with you guys when I actually get started.
Dash is digi, the schedule busy. My head in a hoodie, my shorty a goodie. My cousins are crazy, my cousins like boogie. Life is amazing, it is what it should be. Been here for 10, but I feel like a rookie. I tell her look up, cause it's snowing in Tussies. Booked for 3 years, man, you can't even book me. It's me and Lil Baby, going crazy. Weezy produced it, and Weezy have made me. And she held it down, so she got a Mercedes. Your money records, the Army, the Navy. It ran me 10,000, I threw it like Brady. The foreign is yellow like Tracy and Katie. I trust in my they never betray me. Met all these they sweeter than Sadie. When I started out, I just took what they gave me.
Okay, I feel like that's the best that I can do. So I feel like the running theme for this vlog is that I don't check back in with y'all until like a week later. So like I mentioned in the earlier clips, I am reading this through the Apple Books app, and I am currently on chapter 24, page 104, and there are 281 pages in this book, which is really good. I honestly didn't realize how short this book was. I wanted to give you my first impression / initial thoughts of the book so far, because there's a lot going on here, and a lot of it is weird. And I mean very weird. There are just a few things that are included in this story that I just haven't really read anywhere else. So it's definitely out of my comfort zone for sure, but I'm really intrigued to see where this story is going to go and what Andrea Bartz has planned. But like I was saying, I wanted to give you guys my initial thoughts. I'm only filming right here and have it set up like this because I've been ripping and running all day trying to film a different video, and so I just figured why not just have this set up and just talk to you guys through here, because you're pretty much getting the exclusive to what my bookshelves look like for the Halloween season. I didn't really obviously do too much. I just added little things here and there, as you can tell by the background, but I'm really happy with how it turned out and I like it, and that's all that matters. I'll obviously do a more in-depth tour when I upload my fall / Halloween decor shopping video, so definitely make sure you stay tuned for that. That's going to be coming very soon, but I did just want to quickly address the elephants in the room. First things first that I noticed about this story and that I really like is that it's set in Philly. Like, hello, we need more books that are set in Philly. I've been saying to my boyfriend for a minute that there are not that many books that have Philly as a location, or it'll be like mentioned passively by a character, but I feel like we never really have like Philly be talked about as much as it has been in this book. There were mentions of the main character's apartment being on Chestnut Street, and then there was a mention of 30th Station, and just so many other little regional references that I loved, and that I was like, oh my god, I know where that is, or oh my god, I'm there all the time. So it's really nice to be able to do that little I Spy game in a way when you're reading these types of books, because you know, it just makes you feel a little bit more connected to the plot, just a little bit. Moving on to the main thing that has really caught my attention with this book and has really made me look at it in a different light is that the pandemic is really emphasized in this book. And I would say this is the first book that I have read recently that has like recently been published that really focuses on the little nuances that came along with it. So there are a lot of talks about how the characters, you know, will of course stand 6 feet apart, or instead of shaking hands or hugging, they'll elbow bump each other. Or let's say our main character is walking down the street, she notices someone else, she immediately puts her mask on. Like, there are so many little nuances that we of course did in the height of everything, as well as like lockdown specifically. I just think that it is so eerie, but also just giving so much deja vu. And I know a lot of people don't like when this is mentioned in media, especially books. I know a lot of people still feel like it's too soon, especially because it's still going on. And I totally understand and respect that, but I have honestly gotten used to the fact that this type of topic is going to be included in media from here on out forever, because it literally changed the world, you know? And so I don't really get annoyed or upset or really triggered too badly when I read about that situation playing out in stories. But I will say that with this one, I feel like Andrea Bartz has really like made it a focal point, and I just find that such an interesting choice, and I wonder what made her go that route, especially when so many authors, I feel like still to this day, are refraining from even mentioning it in their books. Especially because a lot of people look at books, authors included, look at books as a way of escapism. Andrea Bartz went against the grain and pretty much was like, no, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about it full steam ahead. I can see that being a very divisive topic amongst readers, and I haven't read the Goodreads reviews on this book, but I can only imagine how many people were airing their grievances. There was even a mention of one of the main characters making sourdough, which I thought was hilarious, because that's how you know that was like the very beginning. That was March 2020, right? The very beginning stages. Like, people were literally in their house making sourdough and doing all of those types of baking projects because there was nothing else to do. She definitely took a dig at the MAGA people. She took a little dig, which I thought was another interesting yet bold choice. She pretty much made a joke or poked fun at the fact that there were people that didn't believe in science and didn't really believe in how severe the pandemic was. And, you know, that's definitely gonna ruffle some people's feathers. That's definitely gonna get the girls tussling on Goodreads, I'm sure. But yeah, I would say that she's made a lot of interesting artistic choices with this book, and I'm not mad at it. Like, I'm not. Like, we need to talk about these things. We need to address it. I know it's still a very triggering topic for so many, but, and I know we're still dealing with the ripple effects of it to this day, and we always will, but I don't think it's necessarily wise to just completely ignore it or act like it didn't exist, because there were so many people that were affected by it and of course have passed away from it, and we don't want that to be a main, you know? And so if that's something that you don't really like in your books, or you're not really interested in reading about just yet, then I definitely recommend steering clear of this book. So now with that part out of the way, let's actually get into the characters and the actual plot at hand and what I think. So first things first, the main character, like I said, her name is Kelly. Kelly is not my favorite character. I'm still intrigued enough by her and her storyline that I want to know more, but I will say that she is not the most likable character for me. I think what it is with her is that she is like a very whiny character. From page 1 up until now, and I'm on page 100. I think I told you I'm on page 100 and what, 1? Let's see. I'm on page 104. It's just her whining. And I feel bad even saying that because she's clearly dealing with relationship issues, and that's going to make anybody feel out of sorts and be a little bit effed up inside. So I totally get it and I do empathize. But reading from her POV and being in her head while she's going through all of these emotions is kind of exhausting. It's a lot. So I think that's why I don't really care for her as much. And I'm hoping as the story progresses, especially with these new developments that I'm seeing, I'm hoping that she'll finally start to kind of like put those emotions to the back burner for a little bit. And we get a little bit more dimension from her, another side from her, because as of right now, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm not really feeling her like that. Kind of gets on my nerves is how impulsive she is. That's something that I noticed very early on, is that she is quick to drop things and really put her needs and her feelings and what she's going through on the back burner, so that way she can tend to whoever is showing her attention. And expanding on that a little bit more, because I have this in my notes, Kelly claims that Nathan and Sabrina make her tap into this like untamed side of herself and make her feel really empowered, yet she does the same thing for them that she did for Mike, and that's putting them before herself. So it's like, do they really make you feel empowered because you're still putting their needs and putting what they have going on in their personal lives before you and your own feelings? So that's something that is a bit confusing for me and that I don't really understand, and I wonder if we're going to explore that a little bit more and really get to know Kelly's like backstory. But I would have loved to know more about Kelly's backstory and like how she really grew up and why she is the way that she is, because like I said, there's just something off about her too. Very different from Nathan and Sabrina, but there's still something off about her. And I sometimes laugh when I read these thrillers because I feel like some of these characters are so obvious in what they're doing, i.e. being a bad person, and the main character will never pick up on it. And obviously, yes, I know it's a fictional story, we need the plot to move along, yada yada yada, but I do feel like there are people like this in real life that really don't clock people's teeth, and I just find that a very interesting way to live. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that you need to be suspect of every single person that you come across, but you do need to proceed with caution with strangers, because you never know. And I know that Kelly has spoken to Sabrina through the phone and Instagram, but like that does not equate to the same thing that you're going to encounter in real life. So I don't know. That's something that has crossed my mind reading a lot of these thrillers, is that people are really trusting and really want to see the good in everyone. And I don't know. Just food for thought, I guess. Another thing is, I think she's very strange. She's a very oddball character, and I don't mean that in a good way. Like, there are some things that she does that is very creepy. She did something that involves someone else's clothes, and that's all I'm gonna say. And I just thought it was a very creepy and disturbing and unsettling thing to read. I didn't like it. I felt very uncomfortable after I read it, and I really wish it didn't exist, but
it did, and I read it, and I did not like it.
And the last thing that I wanted to say that directly ties in with Kelly, I really think that people in general should just stop asking their friends and family for relationship advice, because they're never going to like what they have to say. Unless you have a lot of yes men and yes women around you, you're not going to want them obviously bad mouthing or talking down about you and your partner and your relationship. You're just not going to want it. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to do the exact opposite of what they recommend you do if you're asking them for advice. And so all that to say, I just think it's best if people really just be mindful of telling their friends and their family, but especially their friends, their relationship problems, because your friends are always going to go up for you. They're always going to want to go to war for you and you alone. So I just feel like airing out your grievances about your partner and what y'all got going on to your friends, I just feel like that's a setup. I feel like that's a clear setup, and it just never ends well, in my opinion. Those are really all of my thoughts on Kelly. I really hope that things turn around for her and I start to like her, but as of right now, no. Now moving on to the actual couple that is allowing Kelly to stay in their spare room, Sabrina and Nathan. We'll get Nathan out of the way because I don't really have too much to say about Nathan. He seems charming enough. You can definitely tell there's something sinister and dark-sided about his personality, and I can't wait to find out what it is, but you can just definitely tell that there's something off about him. And he's trying pretty hard to be very charming, a very stand-up guy, and Kelly, being as oblivious as she is, she doesn't really realize it. I was able to clock Nathan's tea a bit early, so at least a little bit of it, because like I said, I don't really know what his motives are or what his agenda is yet, but I can only imagine, right? So I'm really curious to see where this story is going to take his character. Now moving on to the last character that I'm going to talk about, because there are other characters, but I just feel like they don't really matter to the story all that much, in my opinion. I mean, like, they're there, but they're not really giving what Sabrina, Nathan, and Kelly are giving. So moving on to Sabrina, another oddball. Like, honestly, you know what? Let me just say all three of these characters are very unlikable. I know people hate when characters are unlikable and they can't find one character to attach themselves to. And I get it. Being a character-driven reader myself, I totally understand. But yeah, I will say all three of them are unlikable. But clearly, Kelly really, like, irks me, as you can tell, because I really spent, like, a whole good, like, 10 minutes talking about how she is very creepy. But moving on to Sabrina, yeah, she's another oddball. There's something about her that is very off, similar to Nathan, and it really makes sense as to why they're together. They both got something going on beneath the surface, and I'm really excited to peel back those layers and see what they actually have planned and in store for Kelly, because I mean, you can tell by the synopsis, the story is definitely going to go left. But as of right now, nothing super action-packed or thrilling, I feel like, has popped off just yet. So I'm assuming the last half of the book is probably going to be very fast-paced, because that's how We Were Never Here was. It was the same exact way, where it was a lot of build-up, and then once you got to the middle/end, it just took off. And it was just like holding onto your seat for the entire time. So I'm hoping that this book is like that too, but we will see. Now, the plot itself, like I said, very interesting and very bold. So I'm really liking the way that she's going about this story, because I am really intrigued, I'm really hooked, and I'm really interested to see how this is all going to play out. But there are some weird freaky deaky things going on in here, and it's a lot. It's really out of my comfort zone. I don't want to get too deep into this, because at the end of the day, like, I still got in real life people watching these videos, professional people watching these videos. But I will say that, like, I'm not a prude. It's just interesting that Andrea Bartz included these little, like, tidbits in a thriller. I think that's what's really getting me, is that you don't really see a lot of this in thrillers. Romance, yes. Literary fiction, yes. But thrillers, I feel like you don't really see this too much. I am gonna have to spoil this part just a little bit, so fast forward to this timestamp that's on the screen if you don't want to know what I'm about to say. But I don't think poly relationships are weird. That's not what I'm saying. But it is something that is just out of my comfort zone, and that I just don't know anything about, because it's just not my reality. And I don't have anyone in my life, friends, family, whatever, that are in poly relationships. So I'm not very familiar with a lot of the, you know, dynamics and just how things go in relationships like this. But it's just really out of my comfort zone. And so that's something that I'm trying to get used to and acclimated as I read this story, and like really wrap my head around the fact that, like, they are an item, like it's 3 of them and they are together and they're trying to make this work. And it's just, again, so different from my reality. When I say that I find this story or them weird, it's not the poly relationship. It really is just the fact that they all have something going on with them, and you can tell. They can't tell, but you can tell, and it's just very off-putting, and it just makes you feel uncomfortable, and just like, it just makes the story weird, you know? And then there are some little things that happen here and there, like leading up to the threesome, that were just very questionable and, again, weird in my opinion. Especially like on Kelly's end, there were just certain things that she did that just did not make sense to me, and like, I don't know. So I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. Like I said, it definitely spices up the story though, and it makes it a bit more interesting, I will say that. Aside from the fact that Andrea Bartz takes a lot of bold risk with her storytelling, I think that she is a beautiful writer. There's this one quote in particular that I even posted on my Instagram stories, because it was just such a well-written sentence. The quote right here says, "She said it. She said it, and she can't take it back. And now it's sinking into my worldview like a drop of blood in a pail of fresh milk. It mixes its way in, and even if the liquid still looks bone white, I know it's there. My stomach churns." Talk about a sentence. I love the imagery that she painted there. And that's just one of the few strong quotes that I've come across in this book. Another one that I really resonated with and that I felt seen with: I hate spooky things, and I live in fear of being forced to watch a horror movie. Heavy on it. Shout out to Nikki, but no, seriously, like, heavy on it. Like, I am the same exact way. Like, I like spooky things to an extent, but I do not like horror movies. Like, that is just, oh, y'all know that's not my genre in books or movies. Like, I'm just not a horror movie girly. There are certain ones that I will watch, or that I have grown up watching, of course, because, like, it's like a rite of passage, you know. In terms of, like, going out of my way to watch new horror movies, like, or watching really gory ones like Saw and stuff, absolutely not. I don't do that. I don't get down like that. So I totally understood where Kelly was coming from, and I felt seen. But those are really all of the thoughts that I have so far on the spare room. It was definitely a lot, and I feel like a lot more than what I had for None of This Is True. Because None of This Is True definitely threw me for a loop. Now, there are, of course, like I said, some weird things going on in here. I'm just really excited to see where this goes, and if my opinions on these characters and the plot itself are going to change. I finally finished The Spare Room by Andrea Bartz, and I don't even know what to say about this story. This is another book similar to None of This Is True, where I'm just like, what the fuck did I just read? Like, there was so much going on in this story that had me out of my comfort zone and just made me take a few steps back and really analyze like what the story was even about and why and how Andrea Bartz went in the direction that she went in. But I will say that I was entertained. From start to finish, I was very entertained and very engaged throughout the entire story, because this is something that I haven't read before. I haven't really read a lot of these tropes and just storylines that were included in this book and other thrillers especially. So it really does make me wonder if this is going to be a new wave of thrillers where thriller authors are just going to take more bold risk and hope that it pay off. I don't know. I was also very annoyed at the fact that Kelly kept ignoring so many red flags. Like, she was ignoring red flags like it was her job. I just couldn't understand how someone who was in the situation that she was in was able to just continue to push on and ignore the glaring red flags that were presented to her time and time again. And like I already said before, I know that this is a book and I know that authors have to include tropes and storylines like this to move the plot along, but it was just so frustrating to read about how there was something that was so evident that she should be following or listening to or at least considering, and she just didn't want to do that. She was not trying to hear anything negative or bad about Sabrina and Nathan, and she was just so convinced that all of this was in her head and that they're good people and that they would never do anything to hurt her or hurt anyone else. And like, I understand you want to see the good in people, especially people that you might be involved with, but at the end of the day, you don't really know someone's true intentions. You don't really know what's going on in that person's head. And so I just thought that her wanting to full force put so much trust into them and never question anything or really go deeper into questioning them about things was just really off-putting to me. I don't know, I just can't explain it, but I just did not like that part of her character or her personality. Like, I felt like there could have been a better balance of her wanting to push those thoughts to the back of her mind so that way she can continue on with Nathan and Sabrina, while also still wanting to address or investigate some of these things that were popping up that she just simply couldn't deny, in my opinion. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of thrillers, is that the main character will have a good balance of being a bit stupid and not wanting to see things for what they really are, but also still trying to do their due diligence and investigate. And I just feel like with Kelly's character, we never really got that. Like, yes, she did ask Nathan and Sabrina and other characters questions, but the way that she would go about it, and even the way that she would just kind of like brush off their responses or dismiss any more lingering fears after they gave her a solid response, was just very concerning to me. So that's all that I really had to say about Kelly. Y'all, we actually have to talk about Mike, because I said in the earlier clips that Mike is a secondary character to me. I felt like he didn't really contribute that much to the story. Boy, was I wrong. I thought that his character and the way that he was used in the story was interesting. It was very interesting, and I'll just leave it at that. But moving on to Sabrina and Nathan, I still stand by what I said earlier about them. They still gave me sus vibes, and honestly up until the end they gave me sus vibes. And even though there were certain things revealed about the plot and other characters, and my perspective on each character has shifted a bit, I still stand by what I said about Sabrina and Nathan. I still think that there were things off about them, and they didn't really handle things the best that they could. And I do think that it's unfortunate the way that the events unfolded, but at the end of the day, nothing good I figured was going to come out of this entire situation, just because of the optics of it all. Like, there was always going to be a power imbalance between Sabrina and Nathan versus Kelly. There was always going to be shared history between those two, and there were going to be things that they would never ever discuss with Kelly or be truthful and transparent about. And actually, it's really funny and ironic, because there's a quote that kept being brought up in the book, and I can't remember exactly how it went, and for some reason I did not like highlight it or keep it in my notes so that way I could read it word for word, but it basically was along the lines of, complete honesty is very toxic to a relationship. Now, I'm not saying I agree nor disagree with that. I just wanted to bring it up because I felt like that quote really made sense and was so relevant to the actual story at hand, just because of, like I said, the power imbalance between Nathan and Sabrina versus Kelly, and also just the secrets that everybody in the story was keeping from each other. I felt like I really didn't know what was going on in every character's head. Even Kelly, even though we had her POV, I still felt like there were times where she was being an unreliable narrator and that she wasn't really telling the reader the full entire truth. Honestly, I trusted her as much as I trusted Nathan and Sabrina, and that's saying something because I really didn't trust them. I know I sound like a broken record, but it's the truth. Like, the story just felt so different. Honestly, I compare my reading experience to like seeing a car crash or a car wreck on the highway. knowing that it's very morbid and gruesome, but you can't look away. That's how I felt reading this book. Like, it was so effed up and so weird and made me uncomfortable, but I couldn't stop reading it. Like, I needed to know, where was the story headed and why does this all matter in the grand scheme of things. I also really love the themes and messaging surrounding a cruel twist of fate, just how even one minor misstep or one miscalculation or error can completely change your life. And it really made me so reflective, because I feel like a lot of the times we go through life and we don't really understand the severe consequences that some of our actions could have. And I just feel like this book was a great reminder to the reader that you really need to be careful with how you move in life and how you interact with others and how you encounter others, especially when it comes to just not being kind to other people, because you don't know how that karma is going to come back on you. You just don't know. It could come back at you full force, and like I said, in the worst way possible. And I just feel like this story was a great reminder of that. In conclusion, and despite some of the points that I made earlier, I actually really did like this story. I thought that the twists were great. There were a few different twists that popped up towards the end of the story that I was not expecting, nor did I see coming. Just because this type of plot was so foreign to me, I really couldn't work this out in my brain or really try to get the puzzle pieces that I did have and put them together correctly. So the fact that Andrea Bartz was able to surprise me like this and keep me on my toes and completely throw curveballs my way, I really appreciate, because I genuinely did not know how this story was going to end and what was the larger reason behind all of this. Moving on to my rating, I'm going to give this book a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I know that might seem a little bit low or a little bit shocking just because of how I went on about how I actually did enjoy the book, but it wasn't perfect, and I do feel like the pacing was a bit off, especially towards the middle. I felt like it lulled a bit and dragged a bit, and I felt like we could have cut down on a lot of Kelly's internal monologues and battles and really got to the meat of the plot and the action. I feel like the action packedness didn't really ramp up until we got towards the very last end of the book. And even though that was kind of the similar vibe to We Were Never Here, I still felt like that one was a bit more action packed and there was a lot more going on, because the main characters already had a traumatic history essentially. And I understand that these two books are not the same and it's probably not fair to compare them, but I was expecting just a little bit more action packedness, a little bit more over the top, absurd, theatrical plot points and storylines happening, and I just feel like I didn't really get that. So that's why I'm going to settle on a 3.75. But the last book that I'm going to read for this is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I keep saying the last one left and it's the only one left. I don't know why my brain keeps going that route, but yeah. So I'm actually really looking forward to reading this one, and I think I'm the most excited to read this one out of all of the books that I featured in this video, even more so than None of This Is True, only because I haven't read a Riley Sager book since I read Survive the Night about like 2 years ago. And even though I enjoyed Survive the Night, I am a Survive the Night apologist, I always will be, I just haven't really had a strong urge to pick up more Riley Sager books. So the synopsis actually has a chant and backstory, so I'm just going to read the chant first so that way it doesn't get confusing. So right here it says, at 17, Lenora Hope hung her sister with a rope, stabbed her father with a knife, took her mother's happy life. It wasn't me, Lenora said, but she's the only one not dead. Honestly, this reminds me of Lizzie Borden. Like, if you know, you know. I'm not going to get into the full logistics of that, so definitely make sure you go on Google and just look up Lizzie Borden if you're not familiar with that name or what that case is about. But that chant really reminds me of the Lizzie Borden chant, which is really wild. I wonder if Riley Sager took inspiration from that. But let's get into the actual synopsis. Now reduced to a schoolyard chant, the Hope family murders shocked the Maine coast one bloody night in 1929. While most people assume 17-year-old Lenora was responsible, the police were never able to prove it, other than her denial after the killings. She has never spoken publicly about that night, nor has she set foot outside Hope's End, the cliffside mansion where the massacre occurred. Now in 1983, and home health aide Kit McDeer arrives at a decaying Hope's End to care for Lenora after her previous nurse fled in the middle of the night. In her 70s and confined to a wheelchair, Lenora was rendered mute by a series of strokes and can only communicate with Kit by tapping out sentences on an old typewriter. One night, Lenora uses it to make a tantalizing offer. I want to tell you everything. But when new details about her predecessor's departure come to light, Kit starts to suspect Lenora might not be telling the complete truth, and that the seemingly harmless woman in her care could be far more dangerous than she first thought. Ooh, that sounds like it's going to be so good. I see a review from the New York Times book review, and it says propulsive, a dizzying gothic whodunit, which are buzzwords for me, and those perk up my ears because I love a good gothic horror or thriller story. And so I'm seated for this one, and that's why I said I'm the most excited for this, just because it is literally checking off so many boxes, and we're not even at the prologue or chapter 1 yet.
Dash a digit, the schedule busy. My head in a hoodie, my shorty a goodie. My cousins are crazy, my cousins like boogie. Life is amazing, it is what it should be. Been here for 10, but I feel like a rookie. I tell her look up, cause it's snowing in Tussies. Booked for 3 years, man, you can't even book me. It's me and Lil Baby, going crazy. Weezy produced it, and Weezy have made me. And she held it down, so she got a Mercedes. Your money records, the Army, the Navy. It ran me 10,000, I threw it like Brady. The foreign is yellow like Tracy and Katie. I trust in my they never betray me. Met all these they sweeter than Sadie. When I started out, I just took what they gave me. Did all the favors, they never repay me. It worked in my favor, cause nobody saved me.
Hey y'all, I know that this angle is a bit awkward, but I decided to film right here because I was trying to switch up my background, because there's really not that many places in this apartment for me to film, or that I would want to film at. So this is the best that I can do. And also I have to speed this clip up because we are actually at Sunday right now. It's Sunday, September 17th, and you guys know I always upload a video on Sundays around 12:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and I just didn't do that today because this video is supposed to go out at that time. But obviously we are way past that now because it is almost 2 o'clock. So I need to hurry up and get this filmed and get this edited so that way you guys can watch this video on Sunday. So if I am talking fast, or if you notice me going quicker through this portion, I'm so sorry, but like I gotta get this video up. Now if I do forget anything, I definitely recommend checking out my September wrap up whenever that comes out, because if I do forget anything, I'll be sure to bring it up in that wrap up. But I am gonna obviously do my best to give you guys my thoughts on this book and how I felt about it overall. I'm also probably going to be talking a bit louder in this clip because I'm in the living room right now, and this is where all of the noise and chaos ensues. Like, it's ridiculous. We're not even gonna get into it. Moving on to my thoughts on The Only One Left by Riley Sager. So I did listen to this as an audiobook via Audible, and once again, so happy that I did that because I just felt like that made the reading experience even more haunting and spooky and creepy and just so much more unsettling, and I loved every single thing about that. I think Riley Sager's team, as well as the publisher, just did a fantastic job with the audiobook, and I definitely recommend going that route if you are interested in listening to the audiobook. So the first thing that I have to say right off the bat is that I love the fact that I was able to clock so much tea with pretty much all of these books that I read in this video, especially The Only One Left, because I said to y'all in the earlier clips that the chant was giving me Lizzie Borden vibes, and sure enough, there was a reference to Lizzie Borden, and I just love that because when you know, you know. Like, I love a good reference. I love when I'm able to catch a good reference, and I love when authors reference niche things like that. Definitely made me a bit more curious to get further into the story, because if you know anything about Lizzie Borden's case, then you know how controversial it is, as well as just how freaky it is. So knowing that Riley Sager kind of took inspiration from that to create this story, 10 out of 10. I really like that. I also really liked the commentary on that. Also just how some women throughout history have been accused of the most heinous things, and they weren't believed when they pleaded for their innocence, essentially. So you can think of Lizzie Borden, you can also think of the Salem witch trials, the list goes on. So I just really like that little bit of commentary that was also included. It wasn't a whole lot, but it was something that I noticed, and I appreciate Riley Sager for adding little things like that to his stories, especially because with him being a male author trying to write from the perspective of a woman, I just think that it does go a long way. I really do appreciate the way that he tries to handle his female characters with as much care as he could as a male author. Another thing that I have to talk about is just how gothic this book is.
Oh my gosh, injected.
Like I said before, gothic horror and thriller books are some of my favorite books to read because you just know instantly when it's a gothic story. When it comes to the mansion or the house, when it comes to the visions, the hallucinations, or the paranormal things that main characters are experiencing, as well as just the overall vibe and feeling of the story. It's very dark, very somber, very melancholic. I love how that makes the gothic horror and thriller genre what it is. And you guys know, if you've been a consistent viewer, how much I love The Picture of Dorian Gray. And that is one of the most gothic books that you can read, and that's my favorite classic that I read thus far, and it was actually referenced in this story too. It was just all the way around a good book for me. Right now is the perfect time to get into gothic literature. With fall approaching and, you know, spooky season going to be upon us soon, I just feel like this is the best season to read those types of books because they just hit harder. And I love the fact that I kicked off my spooky season in a way with this book. It wasn't intentional, but it happened, and I'm really glad that it did. Another thing about this mansion that they're staying in, you couldn't pay me to stay there. I'm so sorry, love. I'm so sorry. I understand why Kit is there, but I just could not do something like this. Honestly, none of the gothic mansions that I have read about in any of these gothic books that I love, I would ever stay in, like even for a night to stay in there, because just the stuff that goes on when it comes to, like I said, the nightmares, the hallucinations, the visions, just even the people inside the house. If the house isn't its own entity, then it definitely makes, I feel like, other characters in the story feel more bold and empowered to want to do harm and do evil to the people that are in the house. And so that's why I said I can never stay here, but especially because this mansion is situated on like a cliff. Like, she'll wake up one morning and notice a random crack going through the ceiling or the wall that wasn't there the night before, and that's how you know, like, oh, that house is actually decaying. Moving on to my thoughts regarding the characters, starting with Kit, who is our main character. I really liked Kit. I just felt like Kit was very strong-willed and very determined, and I love the fact that she was going to keep digging and digging and trying to figure out the truth behind this house and what really went down that night in 1929, because that's when the actual crime took place. I really liked the way that she was just so determined to get to the truth, but she also was still being as smart as she could be in this situation and still trying to keep herself safe. And it was such a breath of fresh air compared to the last two books that I read, specifically The Spare Room, because you guys know Kelly was not my favorite character, and I just felt like she did not do a good job at asking the right questions and getting to the truth while also keeping herself safe. And I really love the fact that she did not take what these people were telling her at face value. She kept questioning them, kept wanting to know more, kept trying to poke holes in their story and figure out, okay, are you telling me the truth? Can I trust you? Etc, etc. I don't want to spoil anything or get too deep into the weeds with the other characters. I will just say, when it comes to the rest of the cast of characters, I thought everybody did a great job. I thought everybody carried, and I wasn't bored with anybody's storyline or what they had going on or how they played an integral part of the story. I thought that everybody had something to hide, the stakes were high, and you could just tell that everyone was trying to keep their secrets for as long as possible, especially considering the fact that a lot of these people that were in the story were around during the actual massacre. I thought that was crazy that some of these people had been around since 1929. Like, whoa. Like, I was just like, whoa. I was not expecting some of the staff and just some of the people that were in the house that Kit encountered were actually present or at least around during the massacre, like I said. And that kind of brings me to my next point of the topic of age and aging in this story. And that was something that really made me self-reflective. I struggle with the idea of aging and just getting older and what that means and what that could mean and all of that. And I know that it is a blessing if you are able to grow old, but at the same time, just knowing that everything changes. So the physical, the mental, the internal, like everything about you changes as you get older. And it can be a really hard pill to swallow because you're obviously not used to seeing yourself like that. And this was something that Kit brought up when she was caring for Lenore. Specifically, she was, I think, helping Lenore take a shower because she is Lenore's caregiver, and Kit pretty much said that she used to avoid looking at her patients when she helped undress them because she didn't want to know what's to come with aging. If you're lucky to even get old or unlucky, she hasn't decided yet. And I just thought that was such a real statement because as someone who struggles with the idea, like I said, of aging and just what that's going to look like or what that could possibly look like, yeah, it's really scary. And I know it's not healthy to avoid that. It's one of those things that I still get uncomfortable by and still get uncomfortable talking about. Similar to death. I just don't really like to talk about topics like that. And again, I know it's not healthy, but I'm working on it, okay? I'm working on it. That's another thing about this story that I really liked is the fact that this is technically historical fiction, because even though the massacre takes place in 1929, the present day doesn't take place until I think 1983 or 2. Yeah, 1983. Now, I wouldn't say that it's super atmospheric in the sense of like, oh, you're really gonna get hit with the 80s nostalgia. I don't even know what that is because I wasn't even around for the 80s. But you know what I'm trying to say, like, it's not super atmospheric, but I do like the fact that it is a part of the story and it does make it a bit more interesting for me as someone who did not grow up in that time period, but still being able to recognize and identify some things that, you know, I saw my parents with or whatever. Like, there were talks about Walkmans and things like that, and I just thought that was so funny. Now, like I said, I'm trying to make this quick, so moving on to my final thoughts about the plot and just the characters and like the things that I've learned and that I took away from this story. I really felt bad for two specific characters. I'm not going to name names, but I did feel bad for these two characters because it's wild how both of their lives are intertwined and mirror each other so perfectly, especially because what they went through and what allowed them to even bond or have this type of uncanny connection were years apart. I just think that's so wild how fate can allow you and somebody else to have similar experiences, but you guys are different. Even though we might have, you know, physical differences, etc., like what we went through, we both understand, we see each other. And that was something that was evident throughout the story with these two characters, is that they saw each other right away. And I love the fact that they were able to at least have that type of connection, especially given the fact that they were both denied a lot of connections and bonds to other people because of events that took place in their life. Overall, just how I felt about the story, I really did enjoy it, as you can tell by me gushing over it. I think Riley Sager did an incredible job creating this psychological thriller and really making your head spin. There were so many curveballs and plot twists that popped up I was not expecting or that I did not see coming, and it was a great time. It was really nice to be able to read another book that kept me on my toes and completely shocked me. There were a few moments when I was listening to the audiobook where I literally laughed out loud or gasped out loud because I was so shocked at how the story took a different direction than what I was originally thinking. This is one of those books that I feel like you can't put down, and you're gonna want to keep reading and reading it because of just how much information you collect after each chapter, and you just have this urge to want to figure out, just like Kit, what really happened in this house all those years ago, and is it still happening today? You were also on this scavenger hunt with Kit, and it felt like as the reader, you're really immersed in this story and you are right alongside her trying to figure out exactly what is going on. This book definitely made me side-eye a few characters and made me realize that sometimes your family can be your biggest op, okay? Like, I'm gonna leave it at that, but sometimes your family can be your biggest op, and it's really a shame because you would think that the people that our blood would not do you dirt and really have your best interests at heart, but that really isn't the case a lot of the times. Especially when I read these thrillers, the family be dogging out their relatives worse than, you know, actual strangers. And in terms of my rating, I'm gonna have to give this one a 5 out of 5 stars. This is by far my favorite book that I've read out of all 3 of these thrillers. This is my favorite one. So my ranking is The Only One Left, None of This Is True, and then The Spare Room. That is the current ranking that I have for all 3 of these books that I read in this video, but I'm really happy that I was right. I knew The Only One Left was probably going to be my favorite one just because it had those gothic elements and it did what it needed to do. This one was good. Like, I can't even deny, y'all. Like, it was truly a fantastic thriller, and I'm happy that I got to end this video on a positive note, and especially a 5-star, because these reading vlogs that us creators film are very unpredictable, and we never know how these books are gonna go. We don't know if we're gonna like them or DNF them, but I'm happy that I didn't DNF any of these and that I really did like all of these books. I really did enjoy my time filming this video, as well as just reading all of these thrillers and finally being able to knock these off of my TBR. So that is it, y'all. Those are all of the books that I planned on reading for this video, so I really hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, there will be more reading vlogs coming your way, so definitely just make sure you stay tuned for that. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me and my channel out. And lastly, please make sure you follow me on Bookstagram as well as Storygraph. I will leave all of this information linked down below, as well as at the end of the video like I always do. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!